Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to make your own scrunchies. They're really easy to make, any sewer can do this. Have them to match every outfit you want, make them as gifts, even make them to sell. So I'm Christine of christinescrafts.com and this channel is dedicated to crafting on a budget. So what are you going to need? Really very little to make your scrunchies. You're just going to need some elastic, which I've chosen to use 0.5 of an inch wide elastic. It doesn't matter if it's a bit wider or a bit narrower, whatever you've got available. And you want to cut it 7.5 inches long. Now, that's entirely up to you. You can make it a different size if you want. You can measure round your wrist and then add an inch on, or you can make the standard size that I'm suggesting. Perhaps play around with it, make them different sizes. You're also going to need a piece of fabric that you're going to make your scrunchie out of, and you want to cut it 6 inches by 28 inches. Again, you can play around with these measurements. Once you've made one, try different sizes. Make them fuller by making them longer, and make them more defined by making them shorter and narrower. But that's something to play with later. Firstly, you want to take your fabric and you want to, at either end of the length, onto the wrong side, you want to press a small hem, just 2 or 3 inches along the length, and then the same at the other end. And then turn it over so that you've got the right side facing up and fold all the way along the length. Okay, so either end where you've got your little hems pressed, you haven't sewn anything, you've just pressed them, leave that open and then pin the two pieces of fabric together. You're pinning your edges together and you're going to do that all the way along. So remember that we've left 2 inches at the end not fastened together. So we're going to work your way along. You'll see I've used pins for half of it and clips for half of it. So it doesn't matter how you hold them together as long as you're holding them together. Then when you get to the other end, you're going to find your pressed edges again. And you need to measure about 2 inches. They're not exact measurements. It's only so you've got space to work. And mark where you're going to sew to again. And you're going to sew all the way along that edge. So take it over to your machine if you're using a machine. If you hand sew these, that's absolutely fine. It's just going to take you longer. Move yourself along until you've got a good couple of inches and then start sewing. So you're going to sew a little way, reverse to make sure it doesn't come undone, and then sew all the way along the length. Just take your time, work your way along, get all your clips and your pins out the way. Make sure your edges are staying together and keep going. I'm not going to say until you get to the other end, because remember we're not going all the way to the other end. So keep going until you get to a couple of inches from the end. You'll see your pressed hems, and then you're going to reverse and finish off at the end. Again, it's just so it doesn't come undone. Take it out the machine, and then we're going to have to turn our tube out the right way round. So at the moment, the right side is on the inside and we've got those two open bits at either end. So if you've got a thing to turn tubes out, one of those devices that you can buy, great. If not, remember we're doing it all on a budget here. Just find yourself a safety pin, clip it in one end and feed that end into the tube. And the reason you've put a safety pin on is so that you can feed that safety pin all the way through. You can feel it with your fingers and you can just push it through. So you can keep pushing it, pulling it with one hand, pushing it with the other. And keep pushing the other end through and work your way all the way along until you get that safety pin out the other end. And then once you reach the other end, you'll be able to just pull that safety pin and turn it the right way out. And then take your safety pin away. That was just a tool. And now you've got a tube of fabric. It's all ready to be your scrunchie. Okay, but remember we've got it open at either end, and so that's what we're going to deal with now. We're going to take either end of the tube, that 6-inch length, and we're going to sew the two of them together. So you want the right sides facing each other, and you want to make sure you haven't twisted the tube as you do this. It's really easy to twist the tube, and make sure you don't. And then you're just going to pin those edges together and not surprisingly, we're then going to sew them together. So this will mean that you have actually formed a ring with your tube ready to make your scrunchie. We're just going to sew along that seam. And as you can see, we've made a ring now, and we've made sure that we haven't twisted the tube. So just take it over to the machine or hand sew it if that's what you're doing. And once again, you need your little bit of reversing to start with. So you go forwards, reverse, and then sew along your seam. Just means it won't come undone. That's not what you want later on when you're wearing it. Just work your way steadily along. And then once you get to the other end, you're going to reverse again, just to make sure it can't come undone. And then remove it from the machine, cut off your threads. And you're going to be ready to start adding your elastic. So once you've got it out of the machine, you can see you've got that seam. Just pull either side and it'll disappear inside your tube. But we've left a fair size hole that we can now feed our elastic through. So get your piece of elastic and get your trusty safety pin and pop it through one end. And then through that hole, you're just going to feed it in. And again, you're using the safety pin so you can feel it all the way along. So just keep feeding it round, making sure that you hold on to the other end of the elastic. The last thing you want is that disappearing inside. So we want to get to the point where we've both ends of the elastic poking out the hole that we've got left. So once it's all the way around, you'll probably have to pull your fabric a little bit and adjust it so you can get it away. Now you've got your two pieces of elastic, your two ends of your elastic, should I say, and you just need to overlap them like that, and we're going to sew them together. So I recommend putting a pin in because as you go to the machine, this is all going to try and move and it's all going to be a little bit fiddly. So just secure them with a pin or a clip and then sew it. Now, there's lots of different ways you can sew these two ends together. I generally form a box. So on the square where they're overlapped, run a seam down one side, making sure you've reversed to start with so that it can't come undone. And then go across the elastic at one end of your little overlap. As you can see, I've had to turn the scrunchie and run across there. And then again, turn through another 90 degrees and go along the other side of the elastic. And then you're going to go back across your elastic to where you started, and you've basically just formed a little box. So every time you turn it, remember, make sure your needle is in the elastic to hold it in place while you've lifted the foot, and remember to reverse at the end. You really don't want your elastic coming undone later. So if you're doing this by hand, I suggest you do a similar technique, just doing it by hand to make sure there are plenty of stitches holding that elastic. And now you'll find you've got something looking like a scrunchie, but we've still got a big hole. So we're going to remember that we pressed those seam allowances, so it's going to naturally go where we want it to go. I recommend you look where your two seams are, match them up, making sure those little hems are folded in, and put a pin in. Hold that in place. And then you can work either side of that, put a couple of pins in or a couple of clips on, just to hold those edges together. And then we're going to sew that shut. You have a choice here where you could use a slip stitch or a ladder stitch, some people call it, and sew the two edges together invisibly. That's probably the tidiest way of doing this. But if you're in a hurry, you could do like I've done here, which is just run along that seam edge with the machine. So the choice is yours. A nice little ladder stitch to make it invisible, or, as I'm doing here, take the whole thing to the machine and run a little seam along the edge. And I do mean along the edge. You're going to go right along the edge, just making sure you catch both edges, but as close to the edge as you think you can go. Again, reverse at either end to make sure it holds it in place and doesn't come undone. And you're going to have completed your scrunchie. So whether you've done it on the machine or you've done it by hand, that's the last of the sewing. So make sure you clip off any threads so that it's all tidy. And then there's only one little thing left to do. You can see we've got that seam on the outside there. We want our seam really to be on the inner side of the scrunchie. So just pull it through so that the seam lies on the inside of the circle. It's just going to give you a really nice edge when it's in your hair. It's not going to be any seam out there for people to see really. And there you go, you've completed your scrunchie. Well done. You can make as many as you like. Make them bigger, make them smaller. And you can see when you're not wearing it, because of the size you made it, it fits nicely on your wrist. So when you want to take your hair down, just pop it on your wrist and then you've got it available to put back in your hair when you want. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and I hope you enjoy making your scrunchies. Please give me a thumbs up below and any comments you've got. If you've enjoyed this video, you may well enjoy the rest of my channel, which is all about crafting on a budget. So please subscribe below. Thanks for watching and good luck with your scrunchie.